Question 29a. The cost of hiring an open space for a music festival is $120,000. The cost will be shared equally by the people attending the festival, so that C in dollars is the cost per person when N people attend the festival. So part 1, complete the table below by filling in the 3 missing values. So the values are found by taking 120,000 and then dividing it by the number of people attending. So it's one of those situations where the more people that attend, of course, the cost is shared, so the cost should be cheaper per person. So 120,000 divided by 3,000 will equal $40 per person. 120,000 divided by 2,500 people will equal $48 per person. And 120,000 shared among 2,000 people results in $60 per person. So to find the cost per person for the number of people attending when there's 500, 1,000 or 1,500, again we follow the same pattern. 120,000 divided by these 3 values, you'll get $240 per person for 500 people attending, $120 per person for 1,000 people in attendance, and $80 per person for 1,500 people in attendance. Okay. We can also see that for 1,000 people, it's $120. If you double the number of people, so $2,000, it should be half the cost. Now, one way to check your answer would be if you take the cost per person and then multiply it by the number of people, you should get $120,000. So, in fact, 240 times 500 will give you $120,000. 120 times 1,000 will give you $120,000, and so on. Let's have a look at part 2. Using the values from the table, draw the graph showing the relationship between N and C. Now, the top row of the table of values corresponds to the x-axis or x-axis coordinates, and the bottom row, of course, corresponds to the y-axis or y-axis coordinates. So I'll just reveal the graph, and it should look something like this. Okay, so each column represents a coordinate pair. So for example, 500, 240, so locate 500 on the x-axis, and then project upwards until you reach 240, mark a point, and then just mark all the points in turn that correspond to all the columns, and then just a neat sketch of the graph there. Okay, let's have a look at part 3. So what equation represents the relationship between N and C? So it's clear that the number of people in attendance, the more people that attend, the less the cost or the lower the cost per person. So this is a type of inverse variation relationship. So C varies inversely with N, so it'll follow an equation which looks like C equals K over N, where K is the constant of variation. So as N gets bigger, C gets smaller. And K, of course, is 120,000 because K is what is shared among N people. So the equation would be C equals 120,000 over N. Part 4. Give one limitation of this equation in relation to this context. Now this is an open-ended question, which means there's more than one correct answer, and you only need to state one limitation. I'm going to go through a few suggested solutions, so there's obviously more than this, but these are the ones that I came up with. So if one person attends, the cost for that person will be $120,000 according to the model, which is unrealistic given the context, which is a music festival. So it doesn't make sense for one person to attend. Another limitation would be that N is limited by the capacity of the venue. So we can't have an infinite number of people attending. So there needs to be also an upper limit to the number of people in attendance. N must be a positive integer. Doesn't make sense to have a negative 10 people attending or 100.2 people attending, and so on. And part 5, is it possible for the cost per person to be $94 and support your answer with the appropriate calculations? So we need to work backwards. So we're going to use the inverse variation equation. C equals K over N, where K is 120,000. And we're going to solve for N. So if the cost per person is $94, we know that to hire the venue is $120,000. So let's solve for N. So how many people would need to be in attendance so that each person pays exactly $94? So solving for N, if you multiply both sides of the equation by N, we have 94N equals $120,000. And dividing both sides by 94, so to make n the subject of the formula, so n equals 120,000 divided by 94. And we get n equals 1,276.5957 and so on. So it's a decimal answer. But we've seen before that n represents the number of people. So it does not make sense to have 1,276.5957 people attending. So n must be a whole number or a positive integer since it represents the number of people. So therefore, it is not possible to have a cost per person of $94.